All right, we're going to get started here. So take a seat. Thank you, everyone. I am not your speaker today. I am just introducing our speaker here. So we're going to have Ryan Hum, who's from the Canada's Energy Regulator. He's the CIO and VP of Data. Ryan's passionate about digital government, human-centered design, reconciliation, and being a father of two. He was a co-founder of the Government of Canada's Innovation Hub, where he served as chief designer and chief data scientist. During his career, he has worked on issues spanning immigration and settlement, disabilities in the workplace, mining, and health. He's also spent time as the Assistant Deputy Minister for the COVID Task Force at Health Canada. Ryan studied biology, engineering, and design, and is working towards a PhD. Ooh, there we go. He's an adjunct professor at OCAD University and has taught design, public policy, and engineering at Carleton and the University of Toronto. So please welcome Ryan Hum.
I love how he said oops after a PhD, and it totally feels that way. So thank you everyone for coming to the talk. It's going to be on liberating data from government death lodges, and I'll explain what that actually means afterwards. I love how CIOs have to be told how to turn on a little clicker. So thank you, everyone. I'm from Calgary, which is also known as where two rivers meet. I think this is really important because it was a gathering spot, a trading spot, a cultural exchange spot for a lot of the Indigenous people that live in the area. It's better known as Treaty 7 territory right now. Home of Tsuut'ina and Stoney Dakota, as well as Métis Nation 3 from Alberta. And you'll get to why I talk about this a little bit more. Oh, yay, it works. So I work for the Canada Energy Regulator. We regulate primarily energy transport. That usually comes in the form of international power lines and pipelines. And I think most people will understand that we did like Kinder Morgan and Trans Mountain and all these other big projects recently. But for all of you who work in non-digital native companies or organizations, this is probably what you're more familiar with. So we have paper, we have lots and lots and lots of paper, as I'm sure all of you do as well. And I think that's a problem. When we click forward, so over the course of 60 years, we've done 700 different hearings, collected about 28 million pages in paper off-site that I don't even know what's in. Terabytes of transcripts and oral traditional evidence, shared drives, record systems, and then we just get more and more requests and more requests. And something we have to think about and do differently in the future. And I like this quote from Amanda Clark. Some of you probably know her really, really well. I'll read: the blue stuff data are not captured, are of poor quality, or can't be combined effectively with other data, and thus lack the time and resources to think deeply and creatively about long-term policy challenges. I think this is really true. Whether this is about policy analysts or data analytics, or even just being able to tell people what information they have. So this is what a pipeline project actually looks like. This is Trans Mountain, binders and binders and binders of data. This is just what the company submitted to us, not what other people commented on. And if you actually open up one of these binders, you actually see that they're actually legal size or multi-folded over tables. hard to analyze. You get some really rich stuff like raptor nest counts. You get some stuff that no one else has ever seen before. I think no one else has ever seen before. And I say this because at the bottom left-hand corner, you see something called unnamed wetland, right? So these may be one of the few pictures, fish species counts, pH values, dissolved oxygen levels of this water body. And this is not an anomaly at all. I could flip over any page and I would see unnamed wetland with the Latin long information. I think this is important data. I think this is useful data that shouldn't be stuck on a shelf in binders that no one ever would see. And of course, you could always go into our website and you could check it out. Look up C-2014692 redacted A42. I don't understand why no one actually goes see it. But let's change that, right? Hardly an experience and hardly easy to find either. So what did we do over the last couple of years? We took all those files, almost 2,000 PDF files, over 40 pipeline submissions over the last 20 years. We used a fun little program called Python, and it coded all this great stuff. We extracted every single table, map, figure, image out of those binders. Every single one. And we kept all the data provenance. So what page it was from, what author, what pipeline project, meta tagged all of it. And we created a really nice GUI. All this is available on GitHub if anyone wants to steal any of it. And so this is what it looks like now. So don't try to look for C-413692.
Let's take a tour of Birdie. Here in the tagline, you can see how recently the data was updated and access more information about Birdie's dataset. If you already know what you want to search for, you can use the keyword search box. If you want to explore the topics that Birdie has to offer, you can click on these icons. These topics are based on the valued components listed in our filing manual. Imagine I am a researcher and I am interested in information relating to animals, let's say beavers. I enter in my keywords here. If you want to make more complex keyword searches, you can find advanced search tips here, next to the search box. I am typing in beaver and then clicking on search. This results in 464 tables, 0 figures, and 2 alignment sheets. Here are the tables. And on the second page, we see the alignment sheets. Perhaps I want to narrow down the results by topics. I'll click on wetlands and boats and waterways. And then let's say I'm only interested in results from BC. I'm going to click on View More Filters and pick that option. Another option is to narrow down by project. I can click on the filters here or on the project tab here. I am going to choose the Northwest Mainline project. Now we are down to 27 tables. I can click on each table to see the information it holds. From here, I can also click on these links to access the originals in RegDocs, our repository of regulatory documents. If I want to save this table, I can add it to my shelf. I can also add it to the shelf from this main section, or I can add all the results to the shelf. I can quickly download a CSV file of the table from here, which I can later open in a spreadsheet application such as Excel. Let's say I notice something in this table that I want to report to the project team. Perhaps some strange characters in the file I downloaded or an error in the title of the table. I can click on Report this data and explain the issue if needed. A designated staff member at the CER will investigate the issue. Now I have my results on Beavers. I can click on the shelf to download the data tables. I can go down here and download all data tables that are on my shelf. Each download opens in a zip folder and has a CSV file of the data as well as a README document with further information. Another option is to share the contents of my shelf with another person. To do this, I go up here and copy the link. Anyone I send this link will be able to see the content of my shelf.
Pretty neat, eh? I love how I watched their mouth and they said, wow. Imagine if the Treasury Board Open Data website was actually like this. No hit on Treasury Board right now. So in preparing all this data and these tables and everything, what we actually wanted to do too was isolate the traditional knowledge because we weren't actually sure whether or not we had permission to share that knowledge. And so we used an NLP, machine learning algorithm, where we identified keywords that could identify that it might be traditional knowledge. And we took a pretty proactive approach around redacting all of that. We'll soon go through an approach of resharing that back with the communities, but proactively we took things out. If anyone wants to geek out about NLP and talk about how you could actually find this stuff, the key answer is you're actually not looking at the table contents, you're actually looking about the things around it. So, yeah. Ta-da. Okay, so we did the last 20 years of documents of pipelines, and they span such a great, vast area of our country. But there's a couple of places where I think we actually need to go a little bit further back. And we only chose 20 years because those were the easiest to access in terms of electronic files. We already had them in our legal registry that was online. The other ones are actually more in paper. And so we're in the process of digitizing all of those and then scanning them with our table reader and then extracting all of those out. And I say this because we have some really, really amazing projects from the past. And from a climate perspective or a change perspective, I think that there's two major projects that are really quite interesting. The first is the original Trans Mountain Pipeline. So in the 1960s, it was being built and we have all this data on it. And then, as you know, Trans Mountain came back and they're twinning the pipeline. So we actually have the same catalog of environmental data from about 50 years difference gap. And then the same happened with Mackenzie Valley. If anyone is a public policy scholar, I think is one of my favorite projects out there. And so what does this actually look like? I spent Christmas one year just hanging out in my records room, reading through material. I'm a biologist by training. So this is woodland caribou counts in various areas in the 1974. You have porcupine caribou migration paths from a helicopter study over the summertime. And when we talked to different researchers, this happened to be the former Environment Commissioner for Ontario. He said, Ryan, what you're doing is crazy because universities are starving for information about change because you can't actually recreate any of this material. Right? And so I think that this might be one of the few paper copies of the study that exists. And how do we actually liberate this? But it's not only scientists and researchers. I think it's actually nations and communities. I really like this quote. This is from one of our transcripts from 1977. Mrs. Mandel, who was representing the Union of BC Chiefs, who was actually in 1977 talking about the need for cumulative effects and how these small little projects over and over again, you keep saying that they're small impacts, but they accumulate over time. 1977. I think that's pretty cool. And so we actually went through all our transcripts and we thought, okay, well, how often do First Nations come to us? Métis, Inuit. And what knowledge is actually in all those transcripts? And I could tell you it comes up quite often. So over the course of regulating or approving a pipeline, we have a ton of representation in our oral traditional evidence stage of the process. I've read through material about buffalo teachings and what that means for that community. Rat root and the importance of rat root for Métis people and some First Nations, and the teachings around family. We have material about residential schools, sacred sites, oral policies from those communities, and I think such valuable information. And so we did the same sort of thing that we did with the environmental projects. We took our transcripts, ran an NLP through it, and then meta-tagged every single nation that came to, every single participant that was in the hearing room, every elder and traditional knowledge keeper that was there. And then we topic modeled all of it. And so we've actually found out that 144 different communities came to us, and we could identify exactly which hearing on which date they came to us. So over the course of the last year, I thought this was going to be a lot easier, and I could talk it through about the journey, about how do we actually repatriate all this knowledge. And so we gathered almost 20 different traditional knowledge keeper elders, created a knowledge circle where they helped us create a protocol on how to repatriate this knowledge and what is the most important to them, and how to actually be better stewards of this information. During that time, they would say these amazing things. Like, so this is one of my favorite elders, Rose. So you could just imagine on that information that CER is holding, how it could really benefit the community, because some of them are lost and they're searching. And if you actually listen to the tape during that session, she would also go on to say that traditional knowledge keepers are going into the journey world, into the spirit world. And too often we're actually losing these knowledge keepers. This is one of my favorites. Elder Reg, he said that in Blackfoot, there is actually no term for museum. And then the closest word is this, Makim Emma. And it means death lodge. Death lodge, because that is where artifacts, bundles go to die. That they're actually not actively used in the community anymore. That knowledge gets stored and lost and not perpetuating and living and flowing through the community. And I thought that was a really, really great concept. And so how do we actually liberate all this through our death lodges called our Western filing systems? And so we started returning them from the elders that we were talking to, creating a protocol on how to actually do this. We picked Tsuut'ina First Nation because it was around our homelands. And we provided it back to the community, to the chief, and had a ceremony about this, smudged about this. And this one was actually really neat. The elder that we gave this material back to, she said, a week ago, youth in our community were asking us what elders thought about Trans Mountain. And I couldn't tell them the answer. And now I can. And so another elder actually spoke and said, you know, this is where the transcripts belong. This is where the audio files belong. This is where the teachings belong. Do you know who these tapes belong to? Her. So I think this is why we do this, right? Yes, you heard the minister, economic development. I think it's really big for open data. Yes, it can spur innovation. Yes, it can do all these things, but it also can help the environment and also help with reconciliation. This is how I think data can empower change. Thank you. Did I use up all my time?
Dual purpose from here. Not a great idea to do this virtually as well. It's just jarring. Sorry, you're good for time. Thank you for so much for that. Welcome to the floor now for any questions. Please come to the microphones and ask some questions here.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you for an excellent presentation. That was amazing. Maybe could you just describe for a second what you were attempting to do when you went through and tried to use AI to capture or did you use AI to go back and capture and analyze the transcripts? And if so, not to, just asking some questions here about standard approaches. How well did they stand up over time in terms of, I'm thinking about the way in which those tools work and they draw a certain dictionary and a certain approach. Do they translate well for something where you're talking about different cultures, different languages, different nuances? And I'm just curious as to how well it sort of works quite nicely out of the box, or you actually have to do a lot of work to be very mindful of that. That being said, this is amazing, really powerful. So well done.
Thanks. So it wasn't me, it was the whole team. So it was work. It was a lot of work, but work worth doing. So we actually delayed our launch of Birdie by a year to actually do the extraction and protection of traditional knowledge. It was a programmed machine learning algorithm. So we retracted about 20% as a training sample. We had people manually identify the material. We identified keywords. We had actually a couple of different algorithms that we tried out. And in the end, it actually worked out really, really well. I can't remember the exact stat, but somewhere around like 95%. So we thought that was pretty confident. And the other thing that really helped just to get that last little bit over is we thought if that document or that PDF had enough hits around traditional knowledge, we actually removed not that table, but that entire document. And so that's how we were ensuring that we got that last little bit as well. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thanks again for the presentation, Ryan. I had a question regarding the GitHub link that you mentioned. Is that something you'd be willing to share with us? Where might we see snippets of code used to build this?
Yeah,
how can we do it ourselves?
I can tweet it out after this presentation if you want.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
All right, first, I guess I can echo what others said. I think this is super. I wonder with all the other players in the impact assessment game, especially up here in the north, there's similar bodies, you know, the Yes up here in the Yukon, the NERB over in Nunavut that house similar data, both in terms of volume and in terms of some of the really specific information that it may contain. I wonder to what extent is this kind of model and initiative being communicated out to some of those other players, and would there be room for them to, I guess, get on board if they so choose?
I am happy to have as many meetings as it takes to get more people to adopt this kind of process. So this was released about 4 weeks ago. So this is my first like major public talk about it. But the Impact Assessment Agency has known for a little while. Part of the reason why we wanted to share on GitHub was because we don't want everyone to recreate what we created. And we put in a lot of thought into the design of how to actually get people to go into the repository. So I was at a Design Digital Government conference last week. And when you talk to designers in government, oftentimes you hear like, how do you actually design something that's legally correct? How do you design so that you could finish your transaction really, really fast, right? So you don't want to be on some government website for, you know, more than 5 minutes, right? We designed the Birdie one so that you could actually go in it for hours. And in fact, we were talking to one Indigenous user, and she literally said, I got lost in your website for hours. We designed it so that you could go into a Google hole, into a YouTube hole. And I think more governments have to think about this kind of things because the data is complex. These topics, these public policy issues are really complex. You actually want people to go through it. Right? So yes, I'm happy to have as many meetings. Well, my team will probably have a whole bunch of meetings too, but we're happy to share all our learnings. We could share our machine learning algorithm. We could share a whole bunch of it.
Hi, just a couple of questions from Twitter and from the virtual audience. We have about 2 minutes, so if you can keep this shorter. What if you're not on Twitter is the first question.
My handle is @RyanJHum.
Okay.
Ryan, RYANJHUM.
And Carol McKay-Matak was asking, when you speak of returning data and info back, is CER keeping a copy of this info that you return?
So that's one of the things that we have to talk about with nations. So we've created a series of questions to think about how best to store that information. One of them is, how do we retain it? Because we are a court of record and we have to retain a certain amount of information based on how we make our decisions. But that doesn't mean that we have to make everything public. And who could have access to that? And so we're actually going through communities and talking through about that. Interestingly, though, when we were talking to elders, they really cautioned us to not overclassify information as sacred. Because they were really worried that classifying items as sacred would actually make them really, really hard to get to. And then youth and elders wouldn't actually have access to them, which I thought was really, really interesting. And I could explain that a little bit more over coffee if people want.
All right, well, thank you very much.